All right, let's wait one more minute here and see if Joe joins us. All right, it's 7:01. We waited a minute, so hopefully Joe will jump on here in any second, but let's go ahead and there he is. It worked. I'll call this meeting to order. Newberg School District Board of Directors is now in session. Welcome everybody. It looks like we've got maybe 20 or so attendees, or 16, I'm sorry, which is a little bit less than normal, but still a great show of public interest, even in a very stressful time. We're going to do things just a little bit different tonight because we've added back in the flag salute. So having been in some Zoom meetings where a chorus of voices are trying to recite the flag salute, it's a hot mess. I'll just put it that way. So if everybody can remain muted except for the person reciting the flag salute or the Pledge of Allegiance, and I've reached out to Rebecca prior to the meeting and she graciously accepted to volunteer for that. So when Rebecca gets started, if we could all just remain muted, and if you choose to participate or not, again, completely up to you. And then after she's done, we can continue on. Are you ready, Rebecca?
Yes. Okay.
Right,
ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent, thank you. So we have a pretty long agenda tonight. We don't have any public comments this evening, however. So we'll go straight into board comments and superintendent comments, review the consent agenda, get an update from Joe and his team regarding the school opening, also get an update from Shiloh regards to food services. We will approve or look at the code of conduct, approve our superintendent evaluation timeline and process, look at nominations for the OSBA Board of Director, discuss the OSBA convention that's coming up in November, take a quick break, then we'll be back at it to discuss our board member and school assignments that we've done in the past, move into superintendent and board working agreements, and then finalize our board discuss our board evaluation process. So let's get started. All right, for board comments, I'll just call on you, and if you have a comment, that's great. If not, then we'll go on to the next. Dave, do you have any comments tonight?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Rebecca. Okay. Inez?
Yes, I just want to thank everybody for their hard work during these difficult times and flexibility adjusting to whatever the world throws at us. So thank you.
Brian.
I don't.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, I just wanted to share, my girls were joking the other day. They were saying that we don't want to hear any more about old folks saying that young people don't know how to deal with adversity, because just in the past couple of months, they've had the pandemic, quarantine, school's been out, racism, fires, and it really made me think, we're asking our students, our teachers, our parents to do things we've never had to ask them to do before. Even before 2020, we were asking them to push themselves in ways we hadn't in the past. And that's why it's vitally important that we pass the bond that we're putting on the ballot, because we're also asking our buildings to do things that they weren't designed to do. And we really need to have buildings that are capable of providing a 21st century education for our students and keeping up with all those changes that we're asking of all the people going into those buildings. Those buildings have to be able to keep up. So I just wanted to urge everyone to, learn more and make your decision and hopefully vote yes on the bond.
Thank you. Ron, do you have any comments this evening?
Yeah, last week I spent most of the week at my daughter's house in Seattle. She's a public school teacher, teaches middle school science and drama at schools in the North Shore district. And my grandsons are third graders, and a third grader and a kindergartner, and they were starting school on Tuesday. And so I went up to help because my daughter is teaching from home and the boys are taking classes from home. And they needed an extra adult around to help with the first week. So I did. One of the side benefits I really wasn't thinking about, but I got, was to watch 3 different teachers, actually a few more than that, but mainly three different teachers, a kindergartner, a third grade teacher, and my daughter, the middle school teacher, deal with the distance learning. And I had not had a chance to see that firsthand. Everybody was working hard and doing their best. It was kind of chaotic. There were things that didn't go right the first day they had to deal with. A lot of stress. I think it's very similar to the way that we're doing things here, the way they do it there. And I just want to say I really appreciated having a chance to see it from firsthand, what teachers and parents are having to deal with in this time. And it kind of echoes what Bob was saying about probably we'll have to lay off the adversity stuff for this generation for a while at least, and for their teachers and parents.
If you ever want to observe what it looks like, you can come peek in my living room window as we go into it this fall.
I'm sure that would just be fine, me hanging out your living room window and looking indoors.
That's right. All right, I've got a public comment here, or a board comment quickly to make. I just wanted to say this is hard. This is hard for everybody right now. And when I wrote this, I was writing it as my children were screaming in the basement, blaring an Avengers movie on a Tuesday morning. They can't go outside and they can't play. And I'm exhausted trying to keep up with work and keep the house clean and keep the family fed and keep my anxiety over all of this in check. Today marks 1 week that we have all been inundated with this hazardous air. And not only are we isolated from family and friends due to COVID, but now we feel trapped inside, and this is hard. This should have been the first week of school. We had already accepted the reality that in-person learning is not going to be safe at this time. There will be no in-person back to school nights, no fun run planning, no bus stop pickups, and the list goes on and on. 1 week ago tonight, my family packed up our pets and bags and left our home because of the Chehalem Mountain Bald Peak fire. Last Tuesday night, we were in crisis. The winds and the sky were violent and ominous, and at that moment, all that mattered was safety. This crisis has not ended. Evacuees are back home and the fire is contained 100%, but the lasting effects of days upon days of hazardous air and the continued spread of COVID in our community have left us all raw. Emotions are high. Collectively, we are exhausted and scared, anxious about the unknowns because now we have seen how quickly life can change. What we thought would never change, the rituals of back to school in the fall, have changed quickly and dramatically. The support and community engagement that we have seen this last week has reminded me how strong Newberg is. As we were leaving our home, we saw trucks with horse trailers rushing towards the fire to help people. The CVMS parking lot was full of people waiting to help strangers and their animals. Evacuation centers were quickly set up in churches. Friends opened their doors to evacuees, and school kitchens became operation centers in the giant effort to feed our firefighters. This happened spontaneously and out of the communal need to help, to feel useful in the face of uncertainty and disaster. This is Newberg. Are we facing huge challenges in educating our children? Yes. Will we communally rise to meet these challenges? Yes. I understand the fear, anxiety, and anger at the unknown. And I encourage you, and I'm pleading with each of you, to ask yourselves, what can I do to help? How can I take some burden off of those who are on the front lines? It could be as simple as venting frustration to a friend instead of on social media. It could be contacting your kid's school and asking if there's anything you can do to help in any way. It could be staying calm and kind to those around you in the face of so much stress and anxiety. Do what you can to help and know that you're not alone. We will all be okay. This too shall pass, and when it does, we will look back at what we've built, not what we've torn down. Please be safe and kind to one another. All right, Joe's up for superintendent comments.
I'm even going to hit the unmute button before I start. All right. Well, thank you. It is Hispanic Heritage Month. It starts September 15th and goes through October 15th. So tonight I'd like to recognize an artist whose influence is still seen today throughout the world. I actually think that probably all of you know who this artist is, even if you don't know his name. He is Jose Guadalupe Posada, and he was born in Aguascalientes, Mexico in 1852. For most of his career, he created lithographs and illustrations for newspapers and posters, pamphlets, and books. Academics have estimated that during his long career, Posada produced about 20,000 images. His imagery covered a lot of ground, included various persons and issues, including politicians, local crimes, pandemics, and even racism. In his wide-ranging body of work, Posada portrayed beliefs and daily lifestyles of popular groups, abuses of government, and the exploitation of the common people. In 1883, following his artistic and popular success, and because of course we're a school system, I wanted to highlight the fact that he was actually hired as a lithography teacher at a local secondary school. His work was seen in newspapers and posters and things like that. But his most famous work, besides the crime scenes that he would do, because of course they didn't have pictures for the newspapers at that time, was that of the calaveras, which are the skeletons. You've seen them everywhere, especially during the season of Dia de los Muertos, which is coming up fairly soon, where you see playful skeletons adorned with bright colors and dressed up in everyday clothing. You might have seen the movie, Pixar's movie Coco, where you see that same kind of stylistic thing, costumes and decorations and all those things. So his artistic influence spanned more than 150 years and is more popular than ever today. So next time you see a colorful decorated skeleton, maybe wearing a big flowered hat or playing a guitar, you will know that it's the work of Jose Guadalupe Posada. So just wanted to highlight that for Hispanic Heritage Month. I want to thank World Central Kitchen, who organized the folks locally here at Ruddock Wood and Renegade Catering, along with Shiloh Physic. They used our Mountain View kitchen, and I won't take away from too much because I know that Shiloh wants to talk more about that, but I just wanted to thank them and all the local farmers and ranchers who donated raw food that could be, hundreds of pounds of food came in, and those folks used our kitchen to do meals for firefighters and for those people who had been displaced. It was really, you have moments like this, it's been challenging for everybody, but I think moments like this, when you see people, especially as we lead up to an election and you have a very polarized group of people on both sides and everybody coming together in a time of need to help every Oregonian. I think that was a really powerful reminder of what we can do when things get really hard for people. So I just wanted to thank Ruddock Wood again and Renegade Catering along with Shiloh for putting that together in an instant. They're actually over here at Edwards now doing a little bit more of that as they finish off. I also want to thank the community for the patience, and I'm hoping that everyone is safe. Today I was on a call through COSA, which is the Coalition of Oregon School Administrators, and we were listening to other superintendents on a panel from Santiam, Southern Oregon, McKinsey, Mill City, Colton, and just hearing of the challenge of losing entire communities being completely wiped out, not getting in to see their school buildings, whether they're still standing or not. They're not even able to get up to there. They're in doing the work of actually just trying to find their families. The person down at Phoenix Talent said they estimate about half of their students now do not have a home because it has been completely wiped out. The gentleman from McKinsey district, he said his district is about 1 mile wide and 50 miles long. with the highway right in the middle of it, and that's being used for emergency services and is completely destroyed. And so it's all of this challenge happening. Colton, of course, all the folks in Oregon City. So it was really it was great to hear them talk about how their communities came together, about how the challenge of finding the students. And, we're dealing with a lot of smoke. We've had, of course, some evacuation here. Our firefighters and the volunteers who've been out there and doing that. It's pretty incredible. I mean, we're living with this smoke, which is unhealthy, which is why we, did the delay of school. But I just want to thank all the community for their patience and for their support, and everybody who came out to help in this effort, because it's that time when people can come together and just be Oregonians and help their fellow person down the road or across town or somewhere else in the state. So really some beautiful moments in the middle of all of this challenge. We were very fortunate here, and there were very, very many Oregonians who are far less fortunate. So I just wanted to recognize that. And that's what I have tonight.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have our consent agenda. Are there any questions? I would entertain a motion. There's no question.
I'd like to remove the minutes from the consent agenda.
Okay, can you explain why?
Yeah, I'm gonna move to table them. I noticed some corrections I'd like to get made before they get adopted.
Okay, can you send that to Greg and CC me on it as well, please?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Would you like to make an amended motion with the minutes removed?
Sure. I move that let me scroll down to the motion there. I move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors approve the consent agenda as amended.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, the motion and second, is there discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Passes unanimously. All right, next up we have our school opening update. So back to Dr. Morlock.
Well, as everyone's aware, we're a little less open than we thought we might be when we put this on the agenda to talk about school opening. So I'll tell you a little bit about what's been happening, and then I also would like to open up for questions, because I think there are probably several questions that would come forward. So as you're all aware, we did delay our academic start until this coming Monday, the 21st. We have lots of meetings happening this week virtually. We're still planning on doing some device pickup, although today's smoke advisory came out and told us that we might be still in some trouble there. So we're still working on the details of that for Thursday. We are working to connect with every family during this week. We know we have some new people who have been displaced. We know we have folks who are new to the district that we have not yet connected with. We also have people who need to do exchanges of devices, and we still have a significant amount of curriculum to get out, especially to our folks who are in the COA program. Some of that program is there is some paper pencil aspect to it, and we don't have those things out yet. So all those things still being planned on working. Our administrators and staff have been making and trashing multiple plans. They make a plan and then we crumple it up and try another one, or we move it to a different day. And that's been probably one of the more challenging things for us, because we know people are trying to get together and get those things out the door. Our teachers and staff, of course, working very hard to adjust, as now they look at as fewer days what they had planned to do those things. So they're spending most of their time connecting with students, doing some advisory work during this week. This is hard to do, and delaying is also very hard. As I said earlier, we are fortunate where we are, so we have far less than we're dealing with. I think today I got a lot of really good perspective for me about how hard it is here and how much harder it is in so many other places in Oregon. So I'll say it's hard, but I also want to recognize that's not as hard as other places are taking it right now. The challenge of CDL is still that the Comprehensive Distance Learning is still just as large as ever. Helping them with their academics, changing the way that we teach to do this via this remote platform. My own children have been in school. They had planned and already started before Labor Day. And even in a house where we have an exceptional amount of privilege, in that we're native English speakers. We have a lot of connectivity. We have devices. We have doctorate in education involved in making plans and training staff and all of these things. And it's still really hard to get everything and everybody in a different room or in the closet or in the tub or wherever people are going to be, just to find a space for them to be able to have their class meetings, and they're often overlapping. And again, we only have 2 children, so it's even easier that way. So there's a lot of challenge involved in this, and I want everybody to remember the need for patience and grace. This will be hard. We want people to ask the questions. We've hired a support technician that we have available for people to get directly. We know it's going to be a challenge at home. Our connectivity also was an issue, as we had hotspots weren't working because of the smoke, and also the towers being commandeered for emergency services, which sometimes happens. And so we know that came on. So that also created an additional challenge for that. We are going to stay with at least at this time, with the schedule for the quarter ends and things like that. We will try to work on figuring out how to make up that time or days in the coming weeks. But at this point, we're going to try to keep the schedule as is, as there's been plenty of challenge getting that organized. We want to make sure we try to keep things moving along in that way. So at this time, we don't expect anything else. Hopefully, I mean, most Oregonians aren't doing a rain dance. I will tell you that I have done lots of rain dances, hoping for this smoke to clear so we can get going on this, and we could also maybe dampen some of those fire things that are happening out there. So I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions. Oh, wait, one more thing before I pause. Our lunch and meal service in general has been moved to Friday. That was also in our email, but we could not bring people into buildings to do that work because our filtration systems, we don't have that kind of filtration. So somebody had asked that before about our HVAC systems in one of our bond meetings, and I explained to them at that time that we don't have that kind of level of filtration. So we're just bringing in the air that has the particulates in it. So we've kept people out of buildings as well, generally. So it's not been the best thing for us to be able to get the work done we needed to. We have people who've come in on limited basis and then have to go. So we'll see how long I make it tonight. I just came in for the meeting tonight, so I should be fine for a little while. So I wanted to open up for questions to see if there were some direct questions that folks wanted to ask about school openings.
Hey, Joe.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, Dave. Huh?
I just had several people ask. I know it's early, but if we were going to do the makeup days on the days we lost.
Yeah, that's something that we've just begun to discuss. So I don't know if we'll do them. We have some agreements in place, and so we'll look at their agreements and then figure out if we can make them up in certain days across the next few weeks. So that's something that we're considering. We would like to not, if possible, not extend further into June. We know that people kind of set their schedules based on that. I think there's a lot of hope that we will have some brightness from both COVID and wildfires by June of next year. So we would like to see if we can figure that out. So yeah, we've just begun discussing what some makeup time could be for those lost days. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board? I'm not even sure I know what to ask quite yet. I mean, it's just changing every day, but thank you for the update. Yeah.
You're welcome. Yep. We will have more for our next meeting.
Certainly.
Yeah.
All right, Shiloh, are you ready for your update? No, we still can't hear you.
Shiloh, check your preferences in Zoom app and make sure that the correct microphone is selected.
No, is it working? Oh, good, he's got help. There are certainly pros and cons to this type of meeting format. Just yell really loud. We'll hear you then. Well, let's see. Let's give him another minute here.
Is that Joe there helping him?
I don't know, somebody in a suit, could be.
I can't recognize Joe just by his hand in his cuff.
That's Joe.
No.
You can try leaving the meeting and coming back in, see if that shapes it up, or you can come up here and use my computer and talk.
He's on the move. I think he's coming to Greg.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So first I wanted to say this last week's been a little crazy, and wanted to talk to you about the partnership we had with World Central Kitchen, local chefs. So last Wednesday, Paul Loesch from Ruddock Wood reached out to a few chef friends, and we kind of brainstormed Chehalem, the mountain on Chehalem Mountain, the fire up there. And there was probably about 200 meals between churches and people being evacuated. Sorry, I ran up the stairs out of breath. But then it kind of turned into World Central Kitchen reached out to Paul and a few local chefs and said, why don't we make this bigger? And said, I have the resources, but we should be looking at feeding 2,000 to 3,000 meals in a weekend. So they came over, and it was kind of like a mass panic, but Paul reached out to me, and I had some people from the city council said, what's the possibility of us opening up a school kitchen? And so it was a really great partnership to see the community come together. So we launched in Friday, we were on the phone, opened up Mountain View, as kind of Joe said, farmers, ranchers. It was crazy to see how many people were donating food, and a list of volunteers that grew to about 250 for food prep, delivery. Very overwhelming that first day. And then we kind of got our feet on the ground. And it was just an awesome thing to be a part of over the weekend, to hit Molalla, Clackamas, and kind of hit all over the state. And World Central Kitchen is their mutual aid. So they go to all different parts of the country, like Tennessee during like tornadoes or any hurricanes down in the South. So they have central locations where they do this relief aid all over the state. And this is the first time in 8 years that a school district has ever offered their resources. So I was really proud that we were able to do that. And yeah, as Joe said, we kicked up over to Edwards now. So we're going to continue the operation until there's no need anymore. But I know since Chehalem Mountain has kind of dwindled down, some of the focuses are still at the fairgrounds, Molalla, Clackamas, and then some of the families that have returned up on Chehalem Mountain still don't have power. So they've been delivering meals out there. So that's just kind of an update for what's been going on in the last week with that scenario. And then I wanted to get kind of everybody up to speed of what this year looks like for food service. And so starting off, we are going to go to an all delivery system, which was going to launch Wednesday, but with the air quality, we're pushing it to Friday. And we did some rationalizing on what would be beneficial for parents during distance learning. And we wanted to create something where parents didn't have to have another thing planned to go to a site to provide meals for their students. So we really wanted to essentially bring the meals to their doorstep. So it was one less thing for them to plan. So our deliveries are Wednesday and Fridays. Wednesday will cover 3 days worth of meals and Friday will cover 2. Talking to several parents through the launch of this, I've met with several parent groups in our community and realized that we're going to go into launching a pickup site for families that are uncomfortable or do not want meal deliveries brought to their house. So very thankful for the community bouncing ideas off me. So we're going to be starting that next week, where we'll open up the high school during the same days, Wednesdays and Fridays, or if anything else comes up and they need an off day delivery. I really want this to be flexible for parents and work around any schedule restrictions they have. So we've gotten several requests already with either dietary restrictions or the times don't work, but it's been a really great effort on accommodating all those. One thing also, that when we run summer food, where everybody gets to eat for free, we have to have a site that is also open to the public. So not only can you do deliver just under the delivery model or picking up meals, the high school will also be a site where anybody can just grab a meal for the day. So that will be another option for the community. And we're going to launch some communication about that at the end of this week. We wanted the communication around the air quality and stuff. We don't want to bombard parents too much with too many emails. So we're going to get some communication out about that. As of right now, I'm projected starting next week to do 11,000 meals a week, which is pretty good. We're a little bit lower than what we were in May of last spring, but I was really happy to see where that number to start the school year is. So really excited about that. Once we get a few weeks and get this machine going, we're going to kind of launch into phase 2. And I still want to continue the weekend meals like we did in the spring. So in October, I'm hoping to launch into providing meals for Saturday and Sunday for these families. And then that would bring our meal counts to over 15,000 a week. So, one of my goals as a department was consistency. And I think it was a really good growth opportunity for our staff last year with all the chaos that was happening, that we needed to grow with consistency and making sure the parents, everybody received the same dish to the same quality. And our staff does an amazing job, but we all acknowledge that we had some work to do. So I kind of broke it out. If you look at breakfast and lunch with all the vegetables and grains, I broke it out, our kitchens, into subcategories. So 2 middle schools will just focus on lunch entrees. 1 school will just focus on breakfast. And our 2 distribution sites for delivery, which is Mabel Rush and the high school, are going to focus on veggies, fruit, and milk. And that's going to kind of be the assembly site. One thing with doing Uber Eats, it's a little stressful because it's not the normal of having a cafeteria service. It lessens the stress for my staff having the subcategories because they're focusing on one avenue or one component of the big meal picture. So I'm just really excited for the growth this year. Even, with doing distance learning, I think there's a lot of opportunity with community engagement. And so does anybody have any questions? I don't know if I'm going to be able to hear their questions.
No, we can hear you.
Oh, you can. Oh,
Well, I think you may have covered this a little bit, but can you say more about what resources we're using to pay for this?
Are you talking about that? What Edwards?
Well, all the things you've talked about. I'm glad we're doing them. I'm just wondering if you knew where the resources are coming from.
So Edwards, so what they're doing for relief meals with all the local chefs, that's all being ran off donated food. And once donations run out, I mean, they're getting cash donations, food donations. If that runs out, they don't foresee that running out anytime soon. We have an option. I talked to ODE that they can provide some relief and provide food for these guys to keep operating. So this is a very separate entity where we're not purchasing anything. They're running their kind of their own program. As far as our meal delivery service, we're still getting reimbursements from USDA and state. So it's just, it's a continuation of what we've been operating.
Any other questions for Shiloh?
I have a question.
Yep, go ahead, Rebecca.
Is this food plan available to any student like it was in the summer?
Yep. Anyone from 1 to 18 can eat for free.
Cool.
And I think the big thing for us is going under the model, like we're really targeting the kids that are enrolled, but we have to be more proactive because there are students that are not enrolled in our school district. So we need to encompass those families as well. I do have limitations as far as food deliveries. We can't go outside our school boundaries. We've identified those families that have signed up, and I've connected them with the nutrition director from each of their cities like Sherwood and Hillsborough and Yamhill.
Okay.
I just had one question, kind of similar to Ron's. You know, it sounds like materials, food costs are covered. You know, I think all this is fantastic, and you know, even if we're running up extra staff costs, I'd want to, you know, keep with that. I just want to be aware of what we're looking at. Are you looking at higher staff costs with the workload that you currently have?
As of right now, my staff is staying the same. I'm not looking at a bunch of overtime. We actually lost some staff. Some staff resigned this year. And I think with this model, we're able to run a little bit trimmer. Definitely have to be proactive looking at our budget, because when you look at when we are back in the school buildings, there are certain things around our budget, like a la carte, when students are in the building, generate about $200,000 in revenue for us a year. And with doing distance learning, we know that comes right off the table. So we are losing some revenue spots. However, I think that we can make it up with the weekend meals. We generated higher reimbursement than we averagely did towards the end of May. So if I can capture that, I think we're going to be looking really good budget-wise. This month is going to be hard. I mean, just looking at a snapshot of this month, we've already lost some days that we would typically already have some kind of reimbursement for meals being served. So yeah, I mean, we're going to have our work cut out, but we're going to have to be diligent, and we can provide updates for you guys as the months come on.
Who's delivering the food?
So we identified, we've been working with some of the principals. So our EAs that do like crossing guard or lunchtime recess that are about 2 hours a day. They are coming kind of over into our program. And so they're going to be helping out with the delivery. Some of our staff will. I'm going to be going out. I know some of the principals even mentioned that if they have time, they'd like to come out and do some deliveries at home.
Hey, Shiloh.
Yeah.
This is Dave. So are we now at the point where, so kids just come get lunch, but nobody pays?
Yep.
So no, I mean, just all lunches are free at every school all the time.
Yeah. And then we're not having pickups at every school right now. We're just kind of launching that delivery model, but kids will eventually be able to pick up if families don't want anything delivered starting next week, 2 days a week.
So I'm just thinking from the high school, I mean, so they just don't have to sit there and have accounts and collect dollars anymore.
No. So right now, it's just a tally sheet and it's a head count. So it's
Okay.
really easy to have the data because with the meal delivery, we have that raw data, like we know exactly what we're prepping each day. So honestly, food waste and the production is more on point, if you would, because we know exactly what numbers we're prepping for every day. And what we did in the spring, we noticed if the weather was rainy, our numbers would kind of go like this. I feel like we're really locked in and kind of get to see a real snapshot of what we're doing each day. So it's kind of a nice way about this model.
Cool. Thank you.
And then the free meals, it's extended till December 31st, 2020. And I'm sure we're going to get more guidance if that is going to continue into spring or the remaining of the school year. We're still being proactive about getting families to fill out free and reduced eligibility paperwork. We had the expanded income guideline. So we're really encouraging families to still fill that paperwork out as kind of a fail-safe that if USDA decides to go back to an NSLP model where we're charging or having to ring kids up like we were initially going to start this year before they made that announcement the week before we started. We just kind of want a fail-safe to have for families so we can make an easier transition.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, I've been off video the whole time.
When you said like this, and that's okay. We got the idea though. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for partnering too with Ruddock and Wood and Renegade and World Kitchen, because it is it felt good to volunteer and feel like you're helping a little in the chaos, and it was pretty awesome that it was in a school building. So thank you for that.
For the record, could you point which way you pointed when you said it went like this, now that we can see you? Yeah, okay, got it.
Ah, all right.
I was wondering where my face was on this screen. I was like, Joe has it set up differently on this.
That's all right. All right, any other questions for Shiloh? Okay, thank you so much. Keep up the good work.
You guys rock.
All right, next up we've got Karen to talk about the code of conduct.
Hi, so last time we were here, I did a presentation on the content and also had a couple of questions, but really wanted to make sure that I was a resource tonight to answer any additional questions you might have after you've reviewed the document.
So I would like to have an answer to the question I asked last meeting. The language around harassment and bullying has to be unwanted aggressive behavior that involves a real or perceived power imbalance. Can you speak to the power imbalance piece of that and why that's necessary to have in there?
Yes, absolutely. If you actually look at the definition of harassment and bullying that's put out by multiple organizations, that's where it came from. So I would say that the language comes, in fact, I sent something to Dave so he could take a look at it, from stopbullying.gov. It basically very specifically talks about to really be engaged in a bullying process or a harassment process, there has to be an unequal power dynamic. That means somebody either has more power than the other person, or somebody has more perceived power than the other person. And that's really interesting because it's not just physical aggression. It can be, for example, the kind of bullying that's around social prestige. That means basically if you're in a popular group and you choose a student to target who is not in a popular group, then that is what we're talking about in terms of a dynamic that's different, an unequal power dynamic.
So under your definition, someone who's not in a popular group could not possibly harass or bully someone who is in a popular group?
Not at all. It depends upon the situation. I would say that's an example, but for example, if a student might not be a popular student whatsoever and targets anybody in any group, then you definitely have an unequal power dynamic connected to that as well. And it could be about aggression. It doesn't have to be about popularity. That was just an example. And in terms of my experience as a school administrator for many years, I would say that the definition is something that we use in the administrative team to really help students understand what it means to be a bully, which is actually harmful to them, and what it means to be bullied, which is harmful for the victim. We see in terms of the work that we do, we educate students. We don't just punish them. We actually help them understand that their behavior can be really detrimental to themselves, but also detrimental to other students, especially if they are really focused and targeted, which is what bullying and harassment does. And sometimes it's really interesting with students. Sometimes those conversations, those educational conversations, and the reinforcement of that will help them understand what is socially acceptable in a social environment, and that's really positive. Sometimes students who are victims or who are bullies will actually move through a process where they completely change their behavior, and sometimes it takes longer, and it takes more resource to help them understand that physical aggression, psychological aggression, targeted harassment is not healthy, right? It's not healthy for the organization, for the school environment. It creates fear and anxiety. It creates a situation where it's not safe. And especially students, we know now that students who witness bullying and harassment on a regular basis are definitely affected by that, even if they're not the target.
So I feel like you kind of talked around my question because you gave an example and then I gave you the opposite and you said, well, no. So can you give me a specific example where this language would apply?
I can actually read to you the language from the governmental website.
That's okay. I'd like an example that when I turn it around, you don't say, well, no, that would be bullying too.
Well, I will tell you that bullying isn't a one size fits all. And so that's why I'm responding in the way I'm responding. It's not like I can give you one example and that's going to have every scenario that I would encounter as an administrator or as a teacher. What I would say is what is common in all of the situations that I've experienced is really critically connected to an unequal power dynamic. And that's why we have it in the definition. That's why the United States government has it in its definition. That's why every anti-bullying organization that I did any research on has it in the definition. So in terms of,
I'll say this, that I'm not sure what your concern is, Brian. It seems like you're driving at that language creates a class of people who cannot be considered bullies. I don't hear it that way. What I hear is that there are myriad categories of power imbalances. Karen's given us one example. There could easily be another where that same student who got bullied has a imbalance of power with another student in another category. They're not exclusive that way.
My concern is not that we're creating people who can't be bullies. It's that we're creating a class of people who can't be bullied under this definition.
okay, can you explain?
I don't hear it that way either. Again,
Let's use a very
certain situations there are folks who are, and that's why it's not just based on one category. In certain situations, there are folks who are going to be in the powerful category, and that same person in a different category will be at the lower end of the power balance.
I'd like to ask a question, which I think might help here.
Mhm.
Karen, can you tell me what would happen if a clearly low power individual in a particular dyadic relationship decided to make threats, spread rumors, or try to attack somebody who clearly is not at a power disadvantage?
Sure.
Would there be any consequences for the person making the threats, spreading rumors, or attacking?
Absolutely. And then
Under what category would those consequences fall? If it's
that's
not
basically
bullying?
in reaction. You know, it's actually in reaction to being powerless, right? That is part of the problem, and that is something that I've seen also with many students where they feel as though they are being targeted and being bullied. And so there is response that is sometimes physical aggression, sometimes it's psychological aggression. And so it is a reaction again to an imbalance.
But my question is, the student who's making threats, spreading rumors, or attacking someone physically or verbally who is more powerful than them, are there sanctions for the student doing those attacks? Or
absolutely.
And under what it wouldn't come under bullying, so where would it come under?
Well, you know what? I think that when I've actually dealt with it, it's been physical aggression. You know, basically fighting, assault, right? Using epithets against somebody, using hate language against somebody. An example would be, you know, it's a situation where there is an action and a reaction. And in a school environment, that's going to change all the time. That's going to be basically dependent upon what's the antecedent and what is the response, right? And one never knows how a student is going to respond. Students can respond very peacefully in the midst of this, and students can respond very violently in the midst of this. So in terms of my answer is, the reason why we talk about that power dynamic is that we can talk with that student who's been targeted and is responding in negative ways with some real, some powerful education about, we understand what has happened in your past, and that is no excuse for what you just did, right? And so we hold them accountable for that. Many times, Ron, what happens with it is bullying over a long period of time, which is also part of the definition, that it's sustained over a long period of time, or at least multiple times. Sometimes students without any power will respond in that situation. That isn't really typically bullying. What it is a reaction to a bullying situation. And so we are able to then intervene and help that student understand more socially appropriate ways to respond and to get help before they become so angry or so upset. But if they hurt someone else, we hold them accountable.
So there's a threats menacing category that doesn't have anything to do with power balance. There's
Absolutely.
a physical assault category that has nothing to do with power balance. I'm not seeing anything about spreading rumors that's independently a breach of the code of conduct.
I mean, the spreading rumors saying, boy, it's hard. It's really hard to catch that. It's so hard to catch that. I think it's easier now because we have social media.
Right.
We can actually say, hey, look what you just did right here. This is harassment, right? Because what you did was you went online and you targeted a kid and you made his or her life really miserable by what you posted. And it was a rumor that wasn't true.
Harassment's here, but it's tied to bullying and has the same power dynamic tied to it. That's why I'm wondering if the harassment, just harassment in general, I'm comfortable if anything that a student does wrong against another student can be punished in any direction it runs.
Absolutely.
And I'm also comfortable if it's attached to a power dynamic that has the added label of bullying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really comfortable for where two identical actions, one gets no punishment and one gets punishment. So I guess I share to that degree Ryan's concern. The only one that I see that might not have a provision in here is that you've listed under bullying is the spreading of rumors.
Spreading of rumors, yeah.
That's actually that's defined under social bullying. So leaving somebody out on purpose, telling other children not to be friends with someone,
Yeah, but as long
spreading
as it's
rumors.
As long as
But spreading rumors, yeah. I mean, they're considering that one too. It depends on how you're using them too.
Right, but if it's tied to bullying, it's tied to a power imbalance. So if I'm a weaker person, I can spread rumors or make threats, and I'm not covered.
I think go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I think it's important that we use, as the adults in the situation and as the administration, especially in the situation, that we use common sense as we do this process, right? If we understand that we want to make sure that students are understanding their own power or lack of power, and that's inherently human, right? We're really, I mean, a lot of times I talk about just human characteristics in a social environment, and help students understand that it's not just about them. It's about how human beings respond to domination. It's about how human beings respond to submission, right? And in order for us to do that well, we need to have a language there to educate our kids about that, because power is a big word and it means different things to different people. With kids, it doesn't as much, because we can actually talk about what it feels like to have no power and what it feels like to have power in a situation. And so that's how I would use that language, is to help students understand what power they have personally, but also how to acknowledge that they've made some poor decisions with the way that they use their social power or their physical power, or whatever is going on in the situation. It is not cut and dried. It's not as complicated as maybe this language would make you feel like we got to be careful about that. It really is about the interpretation of the administrator, again, wanting to make sure that students are safe in an environment. and holding kids accountable for really negative behaviors.
Well, you just explained why I would favor having bullying as sort of an add-on layer when these wrong behaviors occur. Haven't quite explained why it's non-power oriented threats or spreading rumors isn't covered someplace. I'm not, this is a detail I don't really want to get into at the board level. I'm just pointing out that it doesn't seem, it's not, bullying is not an add-on to not everything that we can call bullying is an add-on to other things that are already prohibited in the code. Most of it is, you're talking about how it's going to have to be handled sensitively in the case-by-case basis, and I think that's unavoidable. I don't have any problem with that. To me, the detail of that threats and rumors aren't mentioned isn't a big deal to me, but it isn't mentioned.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Ron. I think that, if there's another location in the code where we can make sure that we're calling that out, because you're right, it's not always a common power dynamic where that occurs. It's not always about that. It's, I think there's motivation for wanting to hurt someone.
Threats is covered. I put it on myself and forgot in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But the spreading of rumors, I don't see yet. So.
No, and I think that that's something we might revisit in another section. I think that's, again, just like anything else, this is something that we are always improving, and we're always trying to make sure we have the best possible definitions. One of the things that I like about returning to it multiple times over time is that we have a better understanding sometimes and better language to be able to really nail it, right? To really help us understand what we're talking about, so that we can have kids understand and families understand what we're talking about.
Thank you. You've answered my question. I don't know if you've answered Brian's, but I'm happy now.
Yeah.
I have a question there too.
Yeah, Dave.
Just coming out of high school for all these years, you see, obviously they're still in high school. Some of these kids are just coming out of middle school. There's a lot of immaturity. We've had kids call in and talk about words being said, and words can hurt. And sometimes, what I've seen a lot is, words are said pretty freely with high schoolers, middle schoolers. And so definitely a lot of training has to happen. But if you have two kids, with one kid saying something and another kid saying they said something, that's always a really tough one until you kind of get them in the same room and talk it out. So I know that's part of the, the conflict resolution, all that kind of stuff. But I guess just we're going to be careful on, there's a lot of kids, they're immature, they're talking about relationships, they're talking about all kinds of stuff, and they say stuff pretty freely. And then all of a sudden getting somebody else in trouble by just saying, kind of overblowing a situation too. I mean, it's going to be a pretty fine line to walk, don't you think?
Is that your question about?
Well, kind of. I know I didn't frame that really well, but I just know, like, especially the freshmen, sophomores coming to high school, more the freshmen, they're just kind of like, they're trying to figure out who they are. And then things get said in the heat of the moment, in the cafeteria, whatever. And then it's kind of a he said, she said type thing. And next thing you know, you've got somebody got their feelings hurt for sure. But then it's like, did it really happen that way? I mean, it's kind of like that rumor game. Did it really go down that way? And when we have people call in and say, they heard this, they heard that. I mean, every day, all day long, especially in the cafeteria, especially in the hallways, the kids can be, you got 1,500 kids in the hallways, stuff is being said. And sometimes it's not directed at somebody, but it gets said. I'd always stop and go talk to that kid and say, hey, that's inappropriate. If it was really inappropriate, I was taking them to an admin. I guess just, if a kid comes in and says, if I come in and call you a name and it's, and then it's he said, she said, I mean, it seems like admin's gonna have to be really careful with that one.
Well, I think that's not any different than any other code of conduct I've ever used as admin, which is if there's a definition, and then you have to parse between the words and understand what the students are experiencing and get to the heart of it. And I think you had mentioned conflict mediation, and that brings up something that I really think is really critical in this work, is that we're really focusing on education and helping students understand who they are. They don't know who they are, right? As a ninth grader, I was a ninth grade teacher for many years, so I totally get that. They're just like learning who they are. And it's up to us as adults to make sure that we're reinforcing those positive behaviors, but also we're helping students understand you can make a mistake and we're going to support you through that mistake, right? We're not here to diminish you as a person because you made a poor choice on a word, right? But they have to understand that those kinds of words that they're using as a you know, kind of a way to, not kind of, a way to hurt someone else can't happen in a social environment. Over time, we need to help them understand that, right? And my goal would be to do that, of making sure that if you're going to use a targeted hate word against somebody, I don't care what the situation, that's not negotiable. You can't be doing that.
So
Just
if
like
one kid, how would you do it, Karen? If one kid calls another kid a name, but the second kid said, no, I didn't, but there's no adults around, no other kids around, what do you do?
That's very difficult. What we do is we will bring students in together face to face, like in a conflict mediation kind of way, to get to the heart of it. And sometimes we do it and sometimes we don't. I think that that's the reality of the situation. We can't always prove everything that is said. But I will tell you this, that if it happens once and it happens again, that's a pattern. That's a whole different thing.
And we also need to be careful as board members, you know, we're not getting down into the weeds and supervising our administrators. You know, we have other folks who do that. We're looking at the actual code of conduct today. How it gets implemented, that's something that we pay our staff to do. And we need to stay kind of more at the upper level, focused on the actual code of conduct.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the things that's the greatest part about this next process is we will be doing professional learning with our administrators to go through scenarios and talk about what would you do in this situation? Because I think that, we need to get more aligned in our disciplinary processes. And so that's, for me, a really exciting part of having a code of conduct that has really clear definitions and has really clear tiered interventions, so that we can actually then get together and say, hey, listen, let's talk about this scenario. Why did you give this? How did you treat that? And to do that is powerful, because then that changes practice.
Yeah, I'd like to add there too, what you said, Bob. It's like, you know, I understand how you're saying that. We also talked earlier this year about how we need to know what's going on. And so as we implement this stuff, we talked as a board having to really know what's going on with boots on the ground to get feedback, because we're going to vote on something. We need to know how it's really working out. So Karen, or whoever the admin is at that time, comes back in the future and tells us, yeah, this worked, this didn't work, and we need to know all that stuff. So I think these questions are all.
No, you're absolutely right. We'll get those reports on the implementation. I was just saying tonight we're looking at the actual code of conduct that we're going to put out for implementation.
Just to let you know, this code of conduct has gone out to every administrator, and I've gotten feedback from the administrative teams at each level, you know, to make sure that they are in agreement that this code of conduct is effective for what they want to, how they want to use it and how we want to proceed.
Inez, did you have a question?
No, I was just ready to make a motion.
Karen, what would be the negative impact of removing the language about that involves a real or perceived power imbalance?
Well, I don't know what the purpose of it would be. So I'm going to be really honest. I don't know why we would remove a definition that the US government says is the definition of bullying. And it's not a political definition. It's a definition that's used by other districts in our area consistently.
And is that new language that we're adding, or was that in there previously?
It was previously in there. It's been in there for years.
Well, I think in the interest of time.
I have one detailed question that I just want to ask Karen, because it would help clear up one thing. It's on page 15. The second paragraph starts with a sentence that says the suspending administrator may postpone these suspension procedures if there's a risk that harm will occur if the suspension does not take place immediately, which makes it sound like that if, hey, this harm, we're going to go too fast for the harm to occur. The way I read it, the only way they can postpone it is if that might put the person in harm. Did I read that backwards?
Well, no, you read it backwards. I would say this: suspensions it's basically sending a student home right, into a home situation that might be a dangerous situation, which I've encountered multiple times in my career.
Right. That would make sense if it says, if they can postpone it because there's a risk of harm occur if the suspension occurs immediately. But the only, I think it's framed backwards from the intent.
I think that in our, the way we respond to that is, for example, I might actually keep a student in school for the day as opposed to suspending immediately, so that their families can come and we can actually, because they're not available, they're working and they're not available, so that we can actually make sure that that kid's in a safe environment. And then we all as a team come together to talk about what happened.
I think I don't know what to do about that, but I'm pretty sure that sentence is written backwards.
Okay.
And
Take a look at it.
If the suspension does take immediately.
Okay. Let me take a look at it. We have been known to make mistakes, so I'll take a look. Page 15.
Yeah.
Okay.
Karen, when you say it's the U.S. government's definition, what's your source there?
It's actually stopbullying.gov, which is actually utilized by schools across the United States.
All right, I would entertain a motion.
I'd like to move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors approve the code of conduct revision as presented, with permission to fix the sentence in the first paragraph on second paragraph on page 15.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion and second. Is there any further discussion?
Point of order, if we wanted to edit this, how would we do that? Would it be a motion to amend the document, or would it be a motion to direct the superintendent to amend the document?
My motion just allows them to fix it at their discretion, which I think they will fix it. So, because it's pretty obvious it says it off. I don't want to get into the details of wordsmithing. I'm trying to save time.
Yeah.
I move that we strike the language
Brian,
that involves a
Brian.
real.
Brian, sorry.
For amendment. He has a right to make a motion for amendment.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second, and you're moving to make another motion with a different amendment. Is that correct?
You're moving to amend, yes.
Okay, go ahead. I want to make sure I'm on track. Go ahead.
I move to amend the document to remove the words that involve a real or perceived power imbalance.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion?
Yeah, so my real concern here is, we've been I've been reading a lot of the, anti-racism material, and a big theme there is that, white people are on top of the power hierarchy. And so I would take this to mean that someone who is lower on the perceived power hierarchy cannot harass or bully someone who is above them in that power hierarchy. And so I read this to allow harassment against white people by people of color.
I do not read it that way. I read it as a intensifier for a bunch of other wrongs where power is present. And power is not defined in terms of any particular category, and does not require an administrator to adhere to intersectionality or any other pre-prescribed definition of power. So,
but it would not going to use their definition of power to exclude an act from this definition.
It requires it to be actual power, not a pre-described schema of how power is.
It says perceived
distributed. And if I could be allowed to finish, Brian, and anybody who would want to contest this and say that, that this was being done by somebody who's down the intersectionality hierarchy, would be able to say, this could be defended by saying, no, there's other aspects of power that had to be there. And if they're not there, then they're not going to be able to apply it. Since it does not refer to any particular scheme of power, it would be any source of power. And people could use it for that to make it work right. And I do think it's right to add a little bit of an intensifier, to at least some intensifier to the other wrongs, if it's also accompanied by power imbalances of whatever sort.
Okay, in the name of time, we have two motions on the table right now. They both
Yeah.
are seconded.
Yeah.
So
The amendment goes first because
the amendment goes first, correct? So let's vote on Brian's motion first. Do you want to restate it, Brian, or are you comfortable with where it stands?
Remove the language, the words that involves a real or perceived power imbalance from the.
Okay. Yeah, so that's the original one. Okay, that you made, right? And there was a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Okay, it was a 5-2 vote and the motion fails. Ron, can you please restate your motion?
I hope so. Recommend that Newberg School District Board of Directors approve the code of conduct provision as presented with permission to fix the first sentence in the second paragraph on page 15.
Okay, and there was a second. Do we want any discussion around this motion? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And all those opposed? Oh, sorry. All those opposed? Okay, passes 6-1. Brian was opposed. Thank you for your hard work on this, Karen, and the team too. I know that this was a large community effort, so please pass it on.
Yeah, thank you. It was awesome. It was awesome.
Randy?
Yeah, Dave, go ahead. Yeah.
I thought, well, that second one we were voting on Ron's amendment.
That was
What?
the actual main motion.
That's a what?
That was the main motion. I wrote, the main motion had the provision for fixing the sentence in it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have our superintendent timeline to look at. So, oh, sorry, shoot, now I've got to scroll through the whole code of conduct, my mistake here. So our timeline is going to be starting this month. I think that there's sort of new procedures coming on that maybe Ron can speak to a bit more because he watched the webinar from OSBA recommending that we actually start it as sort of an annual kind of constant thing where March and April through November, roughly, we're meeting quarterly with the superintendent to kind of revisit goals and things like that. And it's not something that we've done this year in the build-up, but I think something we can definitely look at doing differently. Is there anything you want to add to that part, Ron?
Oh, I guess so. Typically, we've not gotten around to figuring out our criteria, whether we got the right criteria until we're ready to go right in December or maybe late November. And that's halfway through the cycle of, and the way they suggest is we're still not quite there, I don't think, but the way they suggest is that right after you finish the whole process in March and whatever's been done with the contract extensions done in April, you should already start thinking about what the categories, what the goals are that we want to accomplish through the superintendent, so that they can be working on it on more of an April through February cycle rather than being told what the categories are and then 3 months later or 2 months later being evaluated on those, which I think is fair and more likely to get us even, improve our chances of the very best outcomes from our superintendent's efforts, because they would be clearer about what they're working for, which sounded like a good idea. And so what we're doing here is an improvement because we're accelerating by a couple months the definition of the criteria that the superintendent would be evaluated for. And I'm hoping that if the board's comfortable, we could do this again in April so that we have a longer period for the superintendent to work on the criteria we've identified.
I think that sounds like a fantastic idea. I think the traditional way of doing it is more a holdover from the past where, June and July was just kind of time off and, the boards didn't meet and superintendent wasn't doing a particularly heavy amount of work, and those days are gone. So a more 12-month calendar for evaluation makes a lot more sense.
This morning, I sent a link to the updated OSBA superintendent evaluation worksheet. I'm not sure if everybody was able to look at that today. I'm hoping that you did, because the kind of tool that we've used so far, if everybody can remember back, had the sheets. I think there were like 9 kind of standards, right? And we all kind of filled out each one. And the updated one has, I think, questions and reflections that are more reflective of current practices. Some of the other ones were a little bit outdated, I felt like, and these were more updated. But as part of the business of tonight, it will be looking at not only the timeline and criteria, but also the tools we want to use. So I don't know if anybody has thoughts on the tool aspect of this.
I did not get a chance to look at that, so I'm afraid I can't come. I'm not ready to comment on it. Sorry.
Well,
I didn't either, but I mean, so far the other one worked for us. I don't know why we wouldn't trust that this new one is an improvement.
I think we could do the timeline anyway.
Yeah, I think we
Does
could
it embody
definitely.
different criteria, or is it just a different tool for the same criteria?
There's definitely there's overlap on the criteria for sure. It's not like a one-to-one direct translation, but there's definitely overlap on it. But
Okay.
if the board, that is definitely a suggestion. We could approve the timeline tonight and then revisit the criteria at our next meeting.
You would need to be sure to get it done at the next one so that it meets the 5-month criteria that you set last board meeting.
Perfect. This is why we pay you the big bucks, Greg. You keep us on track. I like it.
I'd be more comfortable doing it that way since I haven't even looked at the other yet.
Okay. Well, I would entertain a motion. Or if there's more questions around the timeline.
So are we doing the recommended motion on the?
Oh, Ron, you're muted.
Without the reference to criteria and tools, yeah, we could do the timeline now.
So if the board decides to go this direction, we could decide that the timeline that's included in the packet is something that we approve of, that we're going to adopt. The criteria and tools will be reviewed for the next meeting. In preparation for the next meeting, you would come knowing sort of which one you liked or didn't like.
Okay.
Any other thoughts? When I was prepping for this, I was thinking, wow, this evaluation is going to be very interesting because it will encompass basically from March of 2020 to March of 2021, and what a off year that's been. So, I think it is good for the board as individuals, and then for us to come together to really look at the tools and criteria, because they could definitely be a bit different this year.
I once had a dentist tell me my teeth looked very interesting, and that was not good news. I hope that Joe didn't take that in the same way.
It will be interesting. No, I didn't mean it that way.
Well, then I'll move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors approve the timeline for the superintendent evaluation as amended.
I'll second.
Okay. The motion and second, is there discussion regarding the timeline? No? Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Yeah, it passes unanimously. All right, so everyone's got homework over the next 2 weeks. Look at the two tools and the criteria, and we can have a robust conversation. Okay, next we've got the OSBA Board of Directors nomination, and it might feel familiar because we just did it a year ago, but to get the position of the Region 13 Yamhill-Polk County Director seat in line with the calendar of elections that the OSBA board has, this will be the third time that I will need to be nominated and by a board in my district. So that's why it's on there again. Last year, Ron cut my speech short, so this year I'm going to take about 20 minutes. No, I'm kidding, I won't. I really love my time on the OSBA board. It's been really interesting to get to know board chairs and superintendents and districts throughout Yamhill and Polk County. I really enjoy connecting with people at the state level. I think the last week really showed it, what that networking has done for our board. I was able to reach out to the Lake Oswego board to say, hey, I see that you have a diversity committee. How did you get this going? And maybe we can learn from this. I reached out to the Hillsborough board chair the week before to talk about how they get their translation services. So I think that having a board member on the OSBA board is certainly beneficial for the school district in which they represent. Somebody have questions?
I will move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors nominate Brandy Penner for the OSBA Board of Director position 13.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All right. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All right. All those opposed? Okay. Passes 6-1 with Director Shannon opposing. Thank you. I'll keep you all updated. All right, next piece of business is the annual OSBA convention held in November. This year is clearly not going to be in person due to safety and COVID concerns, so it's going to be virtual. They have reduced the fee. It will be a one-day event with a $50 per member registration fee. I looked today, and actually they do have it posted with their workshops, and I think that there are some really good workshops and keynote speaker on there, and I think that it could be definitely a valuable experience for our board members. Does anybody have thoughts on that?
Well, I intend to attend. This is, I don't know what to expect this year. It's a little bit iffy, but it's one of the, if regular attendance at something like this is one of the best ways to make sure that we don't stagnate entirely as board members in our development. So I'm planning to go or attend.
Yeah, me too. I think that we can, as an organization interested in educating, we should continue our education. So I'm planning on attending.
That's a good point. Greg, in the past, you have dealt with the registration for this. Is that how you'd like to do it this year, or would you like board members to do it individually?
I can do that. You can just let me know if I'm signing up everybody or just a few or whatever.
Okay. So far, we've got Ron, and Inez is yeses. Anybody else think they'll be able to attend? Bob, Dave, Rebecca? Yes. Brian? Sorry, you're muted.
I'm checking my calendar.
Okay. I was looking too, and it looks like there's going to be at least 2 or 3 chances for the smaller breakout sessions, which I think can be beneficial, because I've noticed in conferences, that's always the good part, right? When you get to network and chat with people and catch up and share ideas, which can be really hard in virtual settings. So it looks like they're going to be trying to address that as much as they can.
Brandy, I would like to attend.
Okay. Brian, any thoughts?
Yes, I will be attending.
Okay, great. So it looks like all of us, Greg. Don't worry about me. I should be free, so don't worry about registering me. All right, thanks for taking care of that. All right, let's take a break. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, so we got a 5-minute break, so let's make it 7 minutes and meet back at 8:30.
2 extra minutes, wow.
You can certainly tell the 3 board members who are the most studious. Oh, 4 board members who are the most studious. You're muted, Ron.
I'm playing a game on my phone, just full disclosure.
That's what you do when you can't look at the baseball scores?
I already did, but they're kind of depressing at the moment, so I went to my other thing here.
All right, let's see. Let's give Bob, Inez, and oh, there's Inez. Let's give Bob and Dave another second to get back here. Bob's back, Dave's back. All right, we're all here, back in order. All right, next up on our agenda is the discussion around board members and school assignments. So this is in regards to the program we've been doing the last couple of years where board members designated 1 or 2 schools to form connections with and to learn more about. The reason, so Rebecca actually brought this up a couple of times, so I thank you for that, Rebecca. The reason I hadn't done that yet this year was due mostly to all the uncertainty of knowing what fall was going to look like. And the longer we went on with it, the more I kind of was like, it's clear that building administrators are going to be having even more work this fall than normal. And I certainly don't want us as board members to be any draw in that work. So I want to have a bigger discussion. Do we think we should continue being assigned with certain schools this year, or do we take a year off? Do we wait till next semester? What are your thoughts?
I would think it makes sense to take a year off. Especially since we can't sit in on classroom sessions or anything, I just don't see what we'll be able to do with this program this year. That's my viewpoint on it.
I think if we can and the administrators have time, we can still connect maybe with the schools that we were assigned last year. I know that one of my schools was Joanne Austin, and Jen reached out to even meet virtually. So I want to continue building that relationship with the schools that I was assigned, of course, with not applying pressure.
Yeah, not being able to physically go into the buildings really alters what we can do to engage, but the thing I really want us to keep in mind is that, this came about as a conscious effort from the board to change our stance to the public and make us more open and receptive to the public. So I want to encourage us to continue to look for ways, even with all the restrictions that we have. It's really interesting how many, even now we have 15 people in attendance, which would be a massive turnout at one of our physical meetings. I think there are opportunities for us to capture that possibility that this format has opened up to do more outreach as a board. I don't know how best to do that, but I don't want us to just, not do outreach for a year, not do outreach in the way we were doing it. Yes, but I want us to really consider creative ways to do outreach, even in a remote forum.
I like your point, Bob, and acknowledging also the difficulties this year. Joe, do you have any thoughts on what you think might be effective?
I wish I could make a plan right now and tell you what it is and not know that it wasn't going to change in a week or 2 or 3. I think it will have to look different, and it will, actually it's been mentioned by members already that there's a lot of extra stress on the folks at the building right now. And so if not putting it off for the whole year, at least pushing back a little bit until we know kind of what that looks like. And maybe there's some community meetings they put on and you could represent at those and make those kinds of connections. People are running around pretty hard right now. So I think I can actually put it on our agenda in our next leadership team meeting and ask them what they think that might look like. Because I think getting their feedback would probably be very helpful with this. And then they could say, you know what, it's just too much, I can't do it. Or they go, actually we think we can, and this is how we think we can do it. So I think gathering the principal's feedback would be really helpful for us to talk about doing this or not doing this, because I'd like to hear from them, because I know that they're running around like crazy. So if that's agreeable to you, I would do that, and then just provide that feedback to you, and then you guys can talk about moving ahead with doing this or not. So we'll have one of those here upcoming. I'm not sure what the calendar is, but it won't be too long before we have a meeting with them. So we can do that and then get it back on our next agenda. But I think that was, if I were going to advocate for anything, I would say feedback from our principals would be really helpful, because they'll be honest and just say, I can't, or yeah, we can. So I think it'd be good to hear from them.
I think it's a good point. I think Rebecca had a question, but she went off video. Rebecca, if you can hear us, if you have a question, there she is.
I would be happy to wait until Joe has a chance to talk to the principals. I do appreciate the contact with each school that I've been in touch with, and getting the newsletters that they send out to the parents. Not having any kids in the schools, it's my one chance to be connected that way. So, but I want to support the principals and do whatever they feel best.
I think it sounds like a good idea too, because I agree with what Brian said. I think a big part of it is being in the school, or going to the fun run, or, you know, handing out the lunch or whatever it is. And if we can't do that, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't potentially look different if it's not a burden of stress on the administrators. So, all right. Is everybody comfortable with Joe kind of coming back to us on thoughts from administrators of this?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right, next up, we've got discussion around our board superintendent working agreement. So Ron, if you want to chime in on this too, we had a meeting earlier this week with Vince, I believe his last name is Adams, at OSBA, in regards to having a facilitated conversation among the board members, so that we could all come together in an environment where we could decide on what we wanted a working agreement to look like, on how we want to treat each other, what expectations of behavior are, how we kind of want to move forward as a team on this. And at the end of that discussion, kind of thought, well, let's put it out to the board. Let's see where everybody feels on this and how you would all like to proceed in this process.
Now, is this just our working agreement with Joe, or just in general how we behave as a board?
So currently, some boards have a board working agreement. Some boards have a superintendent board working agreement. Some have both. Ours is sort of like a one encompassing all of it at this point. Okay. So that would be part of our discussion. Do we want to have two separate? How do we want to proceed?
Okay.
Thoughts?
I mean, the working agreement that we had worked fine for me. So whether we choose to have a facilitated conversation, I'm open to that too.
Brandy,
the current board agreement, the main thing I'd like us to discuss is our use of BCC, and just getting clarity on how we want to use that, and what's our standard operating procedure for that. There were a couple times when there were inter-board communications that were BCC'd, and the way I read it was different, that the BCC was only for the chair to use when responding for the whole, or a single member responding to a constituent and wanted to include that conversation, not as a way for us to communicate between each other. But other than that, I was comfortable with the rest of the agreement.
Dave, did you have a question or thought?
can you frame it again, what you're trying to get at? I mean, I guess I missed something there. Like, with our agreement with each other, kind of talking about like how
Yeah,
we're doing together?
Yeah, currently the document we have is a working agreement, and it does address kind of how we work together as a board and then how we work together with the superintendent. And that's certainly that's one approach we can continue to take. There's other approaches of having a document that just says, as a board, this is how we will treat each other and behave. And this is how we will work with the superintendent, 2 separate documents. So it's up to us how we want to do it. There's no specific regulations on how to do this. This is us as a board saying, this is how we're going to work, and this is how we're going to work with our superintendent. So, we've got a few different options. We could keep what we have. We could have a deeper facilitated conversation and come up with a new document, or still retain this document. It's really up to the board on how to proceed.
I was just thinking, like, with the superintendent, it seems like it's fine. I think we'd all have to admit on the board, we have some work to do. Everybody's made some errors, and I think, we hit our first big bump in a road with George Floyd, and we haven't done so well, since then. So I think people aren't comfortable being on committees, language, tone. At least it's worthy of a conversation. I think people need to, air it out, good and bad. That probably has to happen, maybe more in a working session, not a public session. And so people can just say how they feel and kind of get everybody's, feelings on the table, instead of, a lot of people are holding back right now and not saying anything, or they're not comfortable with other people. So I think that part with Dr. Joe, I think we're doing good. I think with us, the board, though, we're a little off.
We'd certainly it would still have to be a public meeting, because we'd be meeting of the 7 of us. But yeah, it would sure be a work session, not a part of a regular business meeting. That's for sure.
Well, Brandy, so we can never have I guess, you and I talked about this texting a while back about work sessions. So even when we have a work session, we can't do that. And that's not just the board getting together and having a work session.
Do you mean
It's called an executive session when it's not public, and there's Oregon state law that outlines the specific things that can be done, and they are very rigid. It has to do with superintendent evaluation, lawyer consulting, expulsions. I don't remember them all off the top of my head, but they're very specific conditions.
Okay.
No, and that's one of the outgrowths of us being elected officials, public officials. The public needs to be able to monitor our work. And so we don't get that luxury of working in private like a private organization would. Everything we do, anytime there's 4 or more of us, it's a public meeting, and folks are encouraged and entitled to watch us and how we do our work.
Okay.
Good questions. Let's see, Rebecca, do you have thoughts?
Who would facilitate it?
Well, I'm not sure if Vince committed to it himself, Ron, if you pick that up or not. He also mentioned one of their other in-office trainers, Christy.
Yeah, it could be either one of them, I guess. And I'm not familiar with either one of them, particularly in this work. Vince is really new, and Kristen's been around a while. She's very impressive in workshops, but I haven't seen her in interaction with boards, although she's been doing that too. I wanted to just affirm what Dave said. I think I've said several times, I think this board has the potential to be great, but we have to figure out how to disagree and not break trust. And we have to figure out how to fix things when people feel alienated, as several have at different times. So that has to be addressed. I don't know how to, I'm not sure that it has to be a facilitated meeting, but if we don't feel comfortable trying to do it on our own, then it probably does need to be a facilitated meeting. And that's a kind of an assessment we each have to make, I think, as to whether we would feel comfortable doing it on our own. One more little thing I want to say is that the voters elected this board, every one of us, and they're asking us to work together. And so I think we need to try to do it our very best.
To me, it feels like the facilitation would be more helpful in the board evaluation process, and that gets more at what folks are talking about now. The actual working agreement, I raised one issue, but I haven't heard folks talking about the actual structure of the working agreement. It's more soft skills, interpersonal stuff. And that's, I think, would be better addressed through the evaluation than the working agreement. So we might want to think about some way to have that portion facilitated.
There's an advantage there too. Actually, I don't know, probably can't load too much onto that agenda, but I don't know if we can get it in the same visit, but there's also in that board evaluation, there's a more in-depth analysis they can do for us if we want to pay a little something for it. They gave it to us as part of our superintendent search package last year, and I don't want to do another superintendent search just to get the free evaluation stuff. So that might be, I don't know if there's a symbiotic thing we can do with that. That might be explored. I have no idea.
Ron, do you mean to do another evaluation and have a facilitate conversation of comparing the two?
We have that instrument we use. I think we did it in December or something like last year, which would be about the right time for our own little self-evaluation. And then we can get a summary of the results free, but they have a more in-depth stuff which actually generates some good discussion last time. That might be worth, I don't know what they charge. But if it were possible to somehow double up on those without ruining both of them, that might be something to explore.
Mm-hmm. So kind of what I'm hearing is that people are pretty comfortable with the current agreement. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, so with the current agreement, we're comfortable with that. But then I heard that sort of mix. Some people would like a facilitated conversation sort of around board dynamics and communication. Other people would like it around board evaluation. Where do we think? And
it could, sorry, Brandy. I think it could be wrapped into the agreement in the section of effective meetings, because sometimes us not being able to work together make for not effective meetings and long meetings, which distract us from what we're actually here to do, which is, help Joe in leading this district for the betterment of the students' education. So it could fit in the agreement.
I still don't have quite a clear picture of how we want to move forward with this. If you all think we should have that OSBA sort of facility conversation, or stick with kind of what we have, or should we have it around the evaluation, which is the next item on the agenda? So we can certainly have that conversation too.
We definitely should have the conversation. I mean, we've struggled this summer. And if you say we haven't, I mean, that's not true. I mean, all of us have been frustrated at one point or another, or multiple times. And it's not going to be the last tough issue we come up. I mean, we're in a tough world right now. Like Joe said, we're a lot better off than a lot of places around the state, but it seems like 2020 just keeps bringing more stuff at us, and I think as a board, even though sometimes we get frustrated with each other, mad at each other, we got to be ready to be effective, when this next thing comes, because it just seems like there's a hurricane waiting off the coast. Nobody would have predicted the fire thing. I mean, we thought we were just, down as far as we could go. And instead of getting frustrated and mad and quitting meetings early or going too long or whatever, I mean, I think we need to be as strong as we can with this group. I mean, I agree with Ron. I think even though we have some major differences of thoughts on how things should go, we got to be amazing through this tough time, you know, for Joe and all his administrators and the teachers trying to get through the craziest year in their careers. I mean, there's teachers in meetings in tears, you know, having to teach stuff that's not even in their wheelhouse. Kids got to be, you know, it just keeps kind of going. We're not getting out of this thing. We don't even know if we'll have school this whole year. And so we might have to do things really different. And I know that's up to Joe to bring that stuff to us, but I disagree with Ron. I think we can be better and we should try to at least do that, even if we're frustrated with each other. You know, it's kind of like just to put our head down and say there's no issues is not true, or frustrations. And we just don't know the next thing that's going to come up, and we got to be at our best. We just can't be okay.
Fortunately, no one's put it out there that we don't have any issues. So I think that personally, I'd like to see that more addressed in the evaluation. That seems more like an evaluation process rather than the working agreement process.
As long as we acknowledge it, Bob, I mean, as long as we get after it, I'm good with either way we do it. But I think we're definitely gonna have to talk about it, you know, in evaluation or in a meeting, one way or another.
One advantage, I don't know if it's not an overwhelming advantage, but it is an advantage of doing it at the time of the board evaluation. Is it's kind of a disadvantage and advantage. It's 2 months down the road or so. There's time for us to do individual work, which does not have to be public meetings, just on building our relationships. So I know that there have been some of those conversations, and I would encourage others along the way. We have to get to the point. One of the markers we could look for is when we're comfortable having an individual meeting with anybody. And if we can get to that point, that'll be a sign that we're making progress. I'm not going to push people to make individual meetings when they're not comfortable, but we need to get to that point. And well, I guess it's always going to be a little uncomfortable. I don't know exactly what I'm saying, but it would be nice to, if we see opportunities to build relationships one-on-one, that would be good.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is the people definitely want to have the conversation or facilitated workshop conversation around communication and evaluation of us as a board. Do we want to, is everyone comfortable with now moving this discussion, continuing the discussion, but moving it more in the frame of board evaluation? Yes. Okay. So in the frame of board evaluation, do we want to continue to use the tool that we used last year, or do we want to do something different? Any thoughts on that?
Well, and I think I remember it the way Ron's saying it, that to use the tool from last year, we got that free last year, we'd have to pay for it this year. So my question would be how much that would cost, and then, you know, who or how that could be facilitated. Because I think that's where having an outside facilitator would be very helpful to us to be able to see patterns that are harder for us to see as close to it as we are.
I think we can use the tool free, but the only report we get free is the summary report. We don't get the detailed. There's like, I can't remember, 6 categories, something like that, where you get a summary report, but there are like 61 different detailed reports inside that. I think the numbers are wrong, but it's in that, something like that. So I definitely want to use the instrument again. The only way to get comparative data is to keep using the same instrument. I thought it was a good instrument. Maybe there are flaws, but generally it's a good instrument. So the question of whether we get the detailed report or not is separate. But again, it might be in combination with something else that we'd asked them to do, and maybe we could get a relative discount. I don't know.
Do we still have any consultation money left from the superintendent process, or have we used up all that? Okay. I couldn't remember whether we had a session available to us or not.
And we use it all, but we didn't use any of our normally budgeted training money this summer, right? Because we didn't have any OSBA facilitated training or speakers or anything. So I can check with Nikki and see what we have. And I can check with OSBA and see what the cost is as well. And see if they're open to maybe doing a bit of a combination of having a facilitated conversation in addition to that then leading into the evaluation tool. Is everybody comfortable with that?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Because unless the price were outrageous, that more detailed reports that we got last year, I think that would be a really good springboard for some facilitation.
Yeah, and I agree with what Ron said too. You know, if we want to kind of see how we're improving or changing or struggling over time, we've got to use the same metrics or else it kind of throws out every year, right? Okay. Look at that. 50 minutes ahead of schedule. Well done, everyone. Well done. Okay, let's look quickly at future agenda items. Let me get to that page. Here we go. Okay, next meeting will be the 29th. We'll have our monthly financial report from Nikki, a bond update, migrant summer school EL report, SIA approval, approve the superintendent and board working agreement. So another piece of homework over these next 2 weeks, review that, approve the board evaluation process. I will have more information from OSBA by then. Budget committee member discussion, and we already decided on the annual convention discussion, so we can take that off the board. I also think that it could be great for the board to get committee updates next meeting. That could be maybe related to the bond discussion a bit. If we get an update from the PAC, if we can get an update from the 2 ad hoc committees, that would be really helpful as well. So kind of be looking out for that. All right. With that, I will adjourn the meeting. Have a good night, everybody.
Stay safe.
Yes, please stay safe.
Thank you.